From this year. I really appreciate you being here. It means the world. I have so many friends and family, people from all parts of my life here, and it's really magical that so many people come out to support. So thank you, every single one of you, for being present tonight. So, 5 things that I learned. I was just reflecting on what it's been like for a year of having a book out in the world, and what it means to be so vulnerable in that way. And I don't think I was really... So, my name is Michael Leali. My pronouns are he, him, and I am a writer of books for young people. My books are mostly middle grade at this point, although I like to write everything from picture books all the way through young adult. And my first book is called The Civil War of Amos Abernathy. It came out in 2022, and it's about a young boy named Amos who is 12 going on 13, an openly gay 19th century American historical reenactor. And he and his friends are on a mission to prove that the LGBTQ plus community always has and always will be here. My second book is called Matteo, and it is my take on the classic Pinocchio story. 11-year-old Matteo Lorenzini is really trying to figure out what it means to be a, quote, real boy, and things start to get a little wonky when he starts to sprout twigs and leaves and bark and he doesn't know why, and the whole story unravels as he tries to figure out the truth of who he is and share that with those that he loves most. And I have a third book coming out in summer of 2024. It's called The Truth About Triangles, and that book is about Luca Salvatore. His family owns a failing pizzeria. His parents are newly separated, his younger twin siblings fight all the time, and this cute new boy is in town, and he does not get along well with Luca's best friend, who's a girl at all. And Luca feels like he's running interference all the time, trying to get everyone in his life to get along. And that book is really about learning to control what you can control and letting go of things that you can't, and accepting that sometimes life is the way it is and that we deserve and get to put ourselves first instead of feeling like we have to take care of everyone else. I hear you saying that we want to change things we didn't like, and we also want to like own part of it. We want to make it part of our own story. What else? I always loved middle grade fiction. It was my absolute favorite thing to read as a young person, and even as I started to get into my college years, I was like, I feel like I should be reading adult books, and I just kept coming back to especially like science fiction and fantasy middle grade stories. There was such a sense of wonder and exploration and discovery that I just got completely hooked on, and these worlds that kept evolving. And for me, that was such a comforting and exciting place to exist. And so the more that I read those stories, the more I was like, I think it's not just that I want to read these, it's that I want to write these stories as well. Yeah, history has sort of organically become a part of what I talk about in my books. I think that for us to really do better in the present, we have to look back at what we did in the past. And if we're not looking at the history of who we are and where we came from and the things that we've struggled through and worked past, we can't really understand what we're doing in the present or how to be better in the future. So for me, like with Amos, it was really important to uncover and highlight LGBTQ plus history and the history of other marginalized communities so that we can acknowledge what we still need to work on and how to do that and why we need to do that. And for Matteo, I love this idea of looking and capturing these moments, that every present moment is going to become this time capsule for the future for us to look back on and reflect on and see kind of the progress that we make, because we are always bettering ourselves. And for Matteo, the documentary and having this sort of collective community history is so much about this global identity and this idea that we aren't just ourselves, but that we're part of something greater, whether that is a family or a town or a state or a country or even just the world, looking at who we are collectively. Of course, I was brought up watching the Disney Pinocchio, and I always was fascinated by it, also a little terrified, especially the Pleasure Island scenes and the boys turning into donkeys. And still, I loved this idea, and it resonated so much with me because for so much of my life, I've felt like I wasn't boy enough. And I always felt like I was acting, trying to become this boy that the world wanted me to be, my parents wanted me to be. I always felt like I was in competition with my brothers to be more masculine, so I thought a lot about how I sat, how I talked, the way that I walked. I was very conscious of all of these things and tried to put on this face, this mask, this style, and it was really challenging because I'm gay and I knew it from an early age, but I didn't know how to articulate that, and it was really painful. So for me, when I was thinking about Matteo and writing this book, it was really looking at the story of Pinocchio and why does he want to be a real boy and what does that even mean? And I went back and I read the Collodi original, a translation of the original story, and it's such an interesting, episodic, fantastical, out there storyline, but I was still wrapped up in the magic and the world and the heart of it and sort of the mischief of what boyhood can mean for so many people. And so I wanted to bring forward a lot of the ideas and a lot of the heart of the story that I know from the Collodi version, but also all the other iterations of Pinocchio and then my own interpretations of that world as well. And here's what I think. We retell stories that are beloved because they are just that. The power of retelling a beloved story is that it provides space for people of many identities, often marginalized, to see themselves in something beloved. I think we have to talk about what masculinity is because, I can talk about my own personal experience, which is just that I was raised intentionally and unintentionally with so many toxic ideas about what manhood is and what that means I have to become and do and how I should behave and the words that I should speak and the interests that I should have. And I really believed that there was one version of what it meant to be a man, what it meant to be a boy. And I always felt like I was on the outside of that. And no matter how hard I tried, I was never athletic enough. My body never looked the way that I thought it should look. I was never interested, despite trying so very hard, to be interested in sports and woodworking and liking cars, all of these things that are really stereotypical for boys and men. And instead of rejecting my manhood, what I wanted in my stories and as I've grown into my own understanding of my manhood is that it should be more expansive. That one little box that I tried to fit in is a lie. And I want for especially young boys, but really for children of all genders, to understand that there are no boxes. That who you are is true. How you identify is true. It is good and it is worthy of taking up space. And if that is how you identify with your gender, then it is real and it is good. For me, I think it's really important that stories are told from a place of authenticity. And I think that when writers can tell stories from their lived experience, it creates a more three-dimensional character. It allows for all facets of that story, from the plot to the characterization to even the setting, to be as true to real life as possible. And with that, I also think it's important for everyone to embrace diversity in their storytelling. And diversity doesn't have to mean that every protagonist has to be a person of color, a person with a disability, a person from the LGBTQ plus community. But I think we need to look at the world that we are creating and make sure that it is reflective of who we actually see reading stories and taking up space in the world. It is not just one type of person and one type of experience. And I think that the more diverse our storytelling can be, the better off all of our young readers will be, and all people. I think that all stories deserve to take up space. And I think a lot about who I am and the stories that I can authentically write and kind of shine a light on. That's what I want to keep doing. So for the foreseeable, I see myself writing a lot of LGBTQ plus characters, and that's why so many of my stories are grounded in Italian culture and heritage. And I think there's room to grow. There are many more things, there are many facets of my identity that have still yet to be explored. I would say if a young person is struggling with their identity, to offer yourself some grace, that it's going to be okay, and that there are going to be challenging times, and you're not going to get it right every time, and that's okay. As long as you keep moving forward and offer yourself compassion and the grace to try again, and really give yourself the benefit of the doubt, and remember that you are worthy and that you are loved and that you are beloved by so many people on this planet, and probably by people you haven't even met yet, that is coming for you. I think then that leaves people in a more hopeful place. I think those are some of the things I wish that I had heard as a young person. And I wish that I had heard that I was worthy just as I am, that there are no conditions to being loved and to being who I deserve to be, which is fully and authentically myself, just as I am, not putting on a show for anybody else, not trying to fit into a certain box, not trying to wear a certain mask. Just me, as I am. It's good enough. It's great. I really think that books are the greatest tool that we have to develop empathy, and the more we read, the stronger our empathy becomes. And when we grow in our empathy, we become more compassionate human beings. And I think the reason we tell stories, the reason we consume media of any kind, is to better understand ourselves and to better understand other people. And when we can do that, we become more loving, caring individuals. And I truly think that's why we're here. That is why we exist, to be better for each other and to be better for ourselves, and to be a global community that cares. And when we can do that, if we can do that, the better the world will be. I also think it deserves to be said that there's a lot of anti-LGBTQ plus legislation happening right now. It's heartbreaking. It is offensive. It is going to kill young people. And I really think there needs to be, it deserves to be said that we need to continue fighting for our queer youth, especially the trans community, especially our BIPOC trans kids, and then all those other intersections when it comes to disability. These children deserve to be loved. They are worthy, and all of these laws, all of these proposed ideas, what has been signed into legislation, it's vile. And we have to kind of keep voting, but we need to move forward and do more. We need to show up. We need to sign petitions. We need to be actively writing legislation that fights against this. I'm really, really proud of Illinois for being the first state in the country to ban book banning, because stories are that safe space where so many queer youth can feel seen or heard for the very first time. And if we take that away, we are taking away a lifeline for so many kids, and shame on adults who feel like they can decide whether or not a young person gets to live. Both Mateo and Amos, and a little open-ended, because I think what I love as a reader is when the story isn't quite finished, that there's still possibility and there's still hope, and that's sort of an exciting place. I think every story continues to exist, and if it has this complete resolution, it sort of ends. And I'm not satisfied with that, because I do think these characters continue to live on in our imaginations. And that was one of my favorite things as a young person, was to imagine the what next. And in doing so, that gives readers the opportunity to infuse my stories with their own thoughts and dreams and hopes and wants. And so I do hope that young readers leave these books thinking about the what if and dreaming up their own possibilities for my characters.